Hello and welcome to the study in the Book of Acts for Haxby and Wigginton Methodist Church, or for anyone else who wants to use it to think about what the church is, what it should be, and what we've learnt about ourselves as we go forward out of this coronavirus season, at least this initial season. I'm grateful to those who've helped to assist in the production of this material. I've had a minor part, and you'll see some faces in a moment that are the faces of some of those who've helped us to prepare this material. We've all changed in the last months. We've all maybe discovered that what we need from church, what we need from community, what we need from good, honest conversation is something different, or perhaps something more focused than what we had before. We also may have learnt that there is a world out there that needs us to be much more compassionate than we have been, no matter how much we've tried, no matter how hard we have worked for justice and for fairness in the world, that there is always going to be more to do. And we're seeing through this coronavirus season how our structures and our systems disadvantage some, based on race, ethnicity, poverty levels, all kinds of things that need to be leveled up. This is a study that's designed for everyone in the church. It's going to be used in our home groups, those that choose to meet online, as part of their journeying from September until probably just before Christmas. But it's open to everybody, and we've prepared it so that it can be used by individuals, it can be used by people sitting with friends or family who want to spend some time chewing over these questions. We've chosen the Book of Acts because the Book of Acts tells the story of the early church's life as it begins to form, and the problems it wrestled with, the experiences it had, and the challenges that presented themselves, as well as how they simply organized themselves and how they felt about their possessions, their confidence, their place in the community in which they were. There is, if you're not part of a home group, or even if you are, on the church's website, there is material to download, which is the sheet that the home groups will use as part of thinking about this. And those contain the questions that have been prepared and some conversation and discussion by those who've prepared each week. What you'll see in a moment is a conversation between 4 people, myself and 3 others, who've been involved in thinking about and drafting and writing this material. And we're going to each week offer you a conversation between ourselves about the material that's prepared and about the passage we're looking at in particular and some of the themes that emerge from that. If you're not in a home group and you'd like to be part of a conversation that involves this material, then I will be running an online session each week that the home groups meet. So that first week will be the week beginning the first week in September. But if you're on the church's email list, you'll receive an email from me about when those groups will meet and a link to join into those. And they're open to anybody who wants to join in for some conversation. Whether you're in a home group or not, we want to make as much space and opportunity available as possible for us to really carefully consider and boldly consider and even fearfully consider what our church's life will look like beyond coronavirus. So I hope you enjoy the material. I hope it's challenging, I hope it's stimulating, I hope it's affirming, and I hope it helps us to move on as a church as we think about who we are now and what matters most. Hi everyone. So as part of this study, a few of us have taken part in writing and preparing some of the material that you'll be looking at in small groups or otherwise. And as you can see today, Keith and Liz and Jen are joining me, and we're going to be looking today at the first session, which Keith has written. And so we're going to each have an opportunity to respond to really the last question that's part of today's work, which is about the things we've learned during lockdown and how they might influence the way we are church going forward. And we're going to do that quite personally and share our own thoughts, our own feelings, and a little bit of our own experience. So Keith, first to you.
Yeah, I started this off with a fascination for the way the disciples found themselves in a situation of lockdown. And that's what the readings that I've picked out are trying to emphasize, the way that they locked themselves away behind closed doors because they didn't know what was going to happen, and the way that they craved normality later on in the 2 little sections. And that really sort of rang bells with me about the way that lockdown has worked for me, about the way initially, and I'm sure it happened for all of us, experience sort of fear, fear of the virus and how that was going to affect me, because being vulnerable, apparently, and I'm still convinced I am vulnerable with my particular condition, that if I caught it, it would probably be the end of me. So I felt very vulnerable and dodgy about it. So there was this fear. There was this hiding away from the world and everybody else, which it eventually became comforting. But at the same time, I find that there's this urge, something has changed, and there's this urge to carry on and do something else, to tackle things differently, which has grown. And the process of lockdown has been an opportunity for growing and changing and becoming something different. And this session, I hope, is a way for us to explore individually and as a group how lockdown has affected us individually and where it puts us different to where we were when it started, because everybody will have changed to some extent. And how do we be church with the things which we have learned and the way that we have changed?
Thank you. Thank you. Jen, your thoughts and your own experience of this time and the questions that Keith has prepared.
Yeah, I think I certainly resonate with Keith's comments on lockdown becoming quite comforting. I know that leaving lockdown is harder for me than entering lockdown in many ways. But I have also found, which is quite contrary to that really for me, that where I'd been running and running and running for sort of 10 years of small children and all of that, and the world sort of getting smaller and smaller for me anyway, because it was about nappies and school runs and go, go, go. Lockdown with the enforced pause has made the world bigger for me, through being able to look up and out a bit more, through connecting with old friends a bit more. And it does really strike with that sort of end of John, beginning of Acts with the disciples in the room, but also having been left there with Jesus saying to them at the ascension, you know, it's going to be okay. The Holy Spirit is going to come and then you're going to go. And it feels a little bit like that I've had the kind of pause and the wait and the, I don't know what's coming, but from it, there's the potential personally and collectively for a new kind of going to come about as we open up again and look at church again and carry on.
And Liz, your thoughts?
Well, for me, I think I've learned quite a lot about myself during this lockdown period. I think I felt I'm probably more of an introvert than an extrovert. I like time on my own, and I do like time with people, but I've really realised that I do crave community. And I remember early on in lockdown on Palm Sunday watching a television programme of a service with the vicar standing alone in an empty church and just being in tears because we didn't have that sense of being with one another at that point. But I've come to realise that actually we can create community in lots of different ways, and the online communities for me have been really, really life-giving, that we can connect with each other in that way. There's been an unexpected gift for me of more time with my family. I never thought I would have Peter back at home for 5 months, and we've spent time reconnecting with them as a group, and I think it's made us into a much stronger family unit. And it's made me think, like Keith said, about my own vulnerability as well, and in thinking about the early days about how I was afraid to go shopping in case of catching the virus, but that enables us to empathise with other people who are always feeling vulnerable. And I think just this feeling that of things being stripped back. I remember doing some gardening and being able to see through into my neighbour's garden and thinking, you know, when things are cleared away, when the weeds are cleared away, then we can see further perhaps what life's all about. Maybe the disciples felt that things had been really stripped back for them. Jesus has gone, or so they thought, and what would the future look like? But actually, the things being stripped back, it left space for new things to grow.
Thank you. I think for myself, I find I find that I've I've taken part in, without blaming anybody for it. I've taken part coming back into circuit ministry in a sort of church culture of the minister as a sort of general manager or chief executive officer. You know? And that squeezed the things that I think I'm both very good at, but also the things that I think come first in my sense of call to ministry. And for me, the space that's opened up has been the space to, to do lots of recording and to prepare series and lead conversations about deep things in a way that is often squeezed by the life of our church when it is about so much activity. One of the things that strikes me in the passage, the story of the disciples early on, is that they're very disorganized. They're not sure what to do and they're not sure where they're going, as Jen's already said. And that God doesn't ask them to be organized. God doesn't ask them what their plan is and how they're going to achieve it, so much as ask them to be open and to be willing and to wait and to see, which is hard for us because the future is unknown and our church's life is unknown, uncertain in lots of ways. But I found it very exciting to really properly feel like a minister again. I felt like that in lots of moments each week in all the years I've been in Haxby and Wigginton, but to consistently feel that has been really good for me, really good for me. I've learned some things about myself. Some of them I like, some of them I'm not so sure about, and they need some work. But it's been an intense experience, and I think that's the other bit that I resonate with reading the passage of the very beginnings of what became the early church. It was intense. It was intense. And so some of the desire to return to normal is, I think, or what we had before is, understandably for all of us, a bit of a kind of breathing out into a space we don't have to think about too much. But the fact is that the passage and our situation asks us to do quite a lot of thinking and quite a lot of dealing with the intensity of things. So Keith, you mentioned fears and hopes. I think that they often go together. I wonder if in sort of rounding off this particular conversation as part of this study, physically, emotionally, spiritually, maybe for our church's life, what if I jumped on each of you and said in a sentence, what hope do you have and what fear do you have for our church as we re-enter in time the waters of being back together in a building and deciding what we physically do together? I don't know who wants. Should we go in the same order again? Keith, do you want to go first?
I think hopes have yet to be revealed in many ways. I think we need to be open to finding the opportunity of people individually feeling drawn towards some sort of wider community, wider contact, rather than just the church itself. I think our concept of community and togetherness has been distorted a great deal by this, because I'm also, it's a side issue, I realise that there are people within our church, there are people who have maintained a corporate feel through connections like we've got, and some people who have not engaged with online things or have not been able to engage with things like that, who actually are in a very solitary position, have got to be reabsorbed into the system somehow. But that's a side issue. My fear is that that we will, as a corporate body in the church, will draw ourselves towards getting back to normal. Because I don't think I want normal anymore.
It's not a helpful word most of the time, isn't it? Jen, your thoughts?
Yes, my fear is very similar to Keith's, I think. And probably my hope and fear can be summed up in two words, which is my hope is for a lot more being, and my fear is of the return to all the doing. So yeah, so my hope is that we find that kind of fellowship that's described in early Acts, where there's descriptions of the joy of being together, and we really find that fellowship together. And yeah, my fear is that we rush to do the stuff instead.
Liz?
Similar. I think my fear resonates a little bit with Keith in that it's been great to connect online, but those people who haven't been able to, and in some ways we become more separate as a congregation. And I really want us to draw back into being the body of Christ together, if you like. Although we are in one way, but my hope is just that I think we've all been changed by this lockdown experience and thought more about God and faith, and that our whole discipleship will be more authentic. I don't want to overuse that word, but just really putting into that kind of loving God, loving neighbour, the being and the doing, and as a whole, and that will, really focus on our discipleship.
I think in closing for me, my hope and fear are wrapped up in the same word, and that is depth. One of the things that I've had consistently through this time is conversation, occasionally with someone outside of the church who is wrestling with deep existential questions about themselves, about faith, about regret, about forgiveness, about life choice, about the same things we're talking about: hopes, fears, the way they hold their own lives. And I hope that our church is a place where those conversations can find an easy home, if that makes, not easy in the sense of easy to have, but that there's room for that in our church. And my fear is that one of the things that's happened in our busyness in the past is that we've not been very good at going deep. And I want to believe, and I do believe, but the time will tell whether we are a sufficient container as a church for those who come from outside of it, and just for each other as we talk about this experience, that we're able to do that in a way that honors the depth of all of what this time has been for all of us.